ground have died if it hadn't been for that? And up in the air, what must they all have thought? So many of them were just starting important things that morning. Whole families like Leslie Whittington and her husband Charles Falkenberg and their 2 daughters. It had been such an exciting morning. Leslie was a Georgetown University economist. She was going to teach in Australia. They were starting an adventure. And how do you account for terrible coincidence? This is Ruth McCourt and her daughter Juliana. Their plane hit the tower in which Ruth's brother was working. He lived, and she and her daughter died. There was Lisa Frost, just 22, just graduated from Boston University, at the top of her class. She was on her way home to start her career. She was so motivated, said her dad, so determined.
She said, "Dad, I think I know what I want to do in life, and what I want to do is make a difference." She wanted to do something with her life that would make a difference in the world.
There was Robert Leblanc, who had already made a difference in the world. Leblanc was a professor emeritus of geography at the University of New Hampshire. Strange, the decisions that wind up becoming fate. There was the captain of American Flight 77, the one that crashed into the Pentagon, Charles Chick Burlingame. He was going to celebrate his 52nd birthday by attending an Angels baseball game in Anaheim. And when he couldn't get a decent seat at the game, he told his wife, Sherry, "Don't come on the flight this time." And just like that, she lived. Chick's sister, Deborah, said it's hard to imagine what happened on that plane.
They would have had to overpower him. They would have had to kill him or render him unconscious to get what they wanted.
So much damage. Daniel Lee, a set designer for the Backstreet Boys, was coming home to be with his wife for the arrival of their baby by C-section. The baby was born today. A girl, Allison Danielle Lee. Barry Berenson Perkins was an actress. She was in this movie, Cat People. She would have seen her 2 grown sons when she got back to Los Angeles. Instead, her family found itself writing a statement of condolence. Barry was a widow. Her husband was the actor Anthony Perkins. There was Sarah Lowe, a young flight attendant. Smart, pretty, popular, said her former teacher, and gone.
She was just everything you would want your daughter to be.
She had earned advanced degrees, but her father said she just loved to be with people and loved to fly. So many. Lawyer Alan Bevan was completing a transition to a volunteer job on the East Coast. Suzanne Calley was on her way home to her 20th wedding anniversary. "I love her more than life," said her husband. Carol Bouchard, a nurse, newly married, was afraid of flying, but did. This is her brother.
We're one family, mourning, but we stand with everyone else.
There is a Bishop Angel who takes some comfort too, as he thinks about his brother David, who made comedy shows on TV.
He brought a lot of laughter and a lot of joy into this world. And I think that's how we want to remember.
Imagine just a few of the people who came down in 4 airplanes, and they turned out to be just a few of the very many. And out on the West Coast, a young woman attended a memorial service for all the victims this awful week. Wasn't sure where she should be.
My brother is with Engine 3 in New York, and they lost half of their men so far. And I guess I just feel this feeling of being here. I want to be home, even though I live here now. But all of us here are with them.
That was Dateline's Keith Morrison with just some of the stories of the people who lost their lives in the hijackings and in the rescue and recovery efforts. One of the most remarkable stories to emerge from Tuesday's Day of Terror is the heroism of those on board United Airlines Flight 93. We have been hearing fragments of those stories. That is the plane that crashed in rural southwest Pennsylvania. Aboard the plane, which may have been heading toward Washington, it did a sharp U-turn. Passengers who did vow that they would die fighting. One of them, 31-year-old Jeremy Glick, did manage to call his family as well from his cell phone and relay second-by-second details of what was happening on board that plane. Just a short time ago, Dateline's Jane Pauley sat down with the Glick family for an exclusive interview.
What is it about the story we're telling about Jeremy Glick that gives all of us comfort and strength?
I think because it shows that one person can make a difference, and that everyone in this country has the opportunity to change this world and make a difference.
Do you believe in fate?
I do.
Do you believe your husband was fated to be on that plane?
I do. He was scheduled to fly out on an earlier flight the day prior. Even 3 days before the flight, he had begged me to have him stay home. He didn't want to go, and I said, you have to go. You know, you can't say no to your company. You need to go out on your business trip. And I think just with, you know, all of the badness that's been going on, that, you know, God or some higher power knew that Jeremy had strength to somehow stop some of the bad that was going on.
What if he hadn't been on that plane?
I'm not asking that. I'm not asking that. I'm not going there.
Do you think it's possible that Jeremy may have saved the White House?
I think he saved it.
I think so.
I think so.
He saved the White House.
Yeah.
He saved the White House.
It's funny. I was speaking to a business associate who called me when he heard the news. And at that point, all we knew was that Jeremy was lost. We didn't know any of the other details. And he said to me, you know, that's the only plane that didn't hit something. Jeremy was on that plane. There's got to be a reason. And he wasn't the only one. 2 or 3 people came up and said exactly the same thing before they knew any of the details.
Liz, what words from that phone call give you the most comfort now?
We said I love you 1,000 times over and over and over again, and it just brought so much peace to us. And I mean, it wasn't even the word. I felt, you know, the feeling from it. And you know, he told me to, you know, he said, I love Emmy, who's our daughter, and to take care of her. And then he said, you know, whatever decisions you make in your life, I need you to be happy, and I will respect any decisions that you make. And that's what he said. I think that gives me the most comfort.
Jane Pauley in her exclusive interview tonight with members of the Glick family, defiance amid desperation. The rest of Jane Pauley's exclusive interview tomorrow night. But now let's go to NBC's Rahema Ellis, who's standing by at the Bereavement Center in Lower Manhattan. And if ever a city needed such a center, this is the one. Rahema?
Tom, I'm at 26 and Lexington on the east side, and this is the armory behind me, where thousands of people have been gathering all day long to go inside and give detailed information about their loved one who is missing, and they don't know what has happened. The information is extremely detailed. Not only do they want the birth and birth date and birthplace and social security number, but any and every kind of distinguishing mark that they could give them, from a birthmark. They want to know about dental records, prostheses, anything at all that will help these workers to identify victims. One man who's standing with me right now has gone through the process. You've been looking for your uncle.
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And tell me about him.
Been hit by a plane, and that they were looking for a way out, but they didn't know how to get out, and just telling me that he loved me. And I know my husband, he wasn't calling to worry me. He was calling me because he thought it may be the last time he spoke to me.
Sophie tried to get help, calling 911. She reached a number in Connecticut. Her efforts were futile. Meanwhile, the Pelletier's friend Randy Christ had managed to reach Mike after trying desperately for half an hour. They spoke for 5 minutes.
I said, what are you doing right now? And he said, I'm leaning out of the window, I'm trying to get air.
The phone went dead. About 30 minutes later, the tower collapsed. Sophie has had no further news from any source of Mike's fate.
I just want to have him home. He was my life, my soulmate, the father of my children, my husband. You know, I feel like I can't live without him, but I have to. If anyone has seen Mike or heard from him or heard that someone saw him, if you could please call us at home at 203-861-7811.
This community has mobilized itself for grief and the realization that it has become a city of orphaned children, widowed wives, and unanswered questions.
As an example, we have one family whose father was a Little League coach. And I have parents calling from his team and saying, what am I going to tell these children about where their coach is?
Here at the hairdressers, blanks instead of appointments, and fear of thinking too hard about the names.
Well, we had one lady whose husband worked in the building, and she spent most of the time here either on her telephone to people, or we had a couple of people run in and wanted to try and contact people who are in the city.
Escape to the suburbs. The idea was once tantalizing to each of the people who decided to settle here in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the other communities that were once within view of the Twin Towers. Now around here, escape is all about life and death.
NBC's John Hockenberry demonstrating once again that wealth and privilege are no protection against these kinds of acts of terrorism. And joining us now from the Washington Post is America.
And in Washington, the FBI website, all of the emergency websites in New York as well, in which people who are searching for people can at least make a very tenuous connection with what is going on. And as families all over the country, family and relatives all over the country continue to search for other members of the family, other relatives, close friends, at least they can get some indication, if they do not know at this point, whether or not those people have been accounted for. But it does lead us in the direction of this report, and will make it, I hope, more understandable from John Quinones what it's like to spend a day in the life of those who have lost their loved ones.
Please, any information, we appreciate it, please. It was in Building 1.
They just will not give up hope. The families of the missing still handing out pictures, plastering them all over mailboxes, on walls, even vans, clinging to the thought that their loved ones just somehow might have survived the catastrophe.
Right now, we don't even want to assume the worst. You know, my husband's a very big athletic guy, and he's a fighter, and he would fight to come home to us.
James Carson worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, the brokerage firm that lost some 700 employees in the World Trade Center. James was working on the 103rd floor of the North Tower when the second airliner slammed into the building. His wife, Debbie, immediately called his office.
And I just kept screaming in the phone, you know, is Jay Carson there? And someone screamed back, yes. And then the phone went dead.
It's been 2.5 days now, and Debbie, who was pregnant, has heard nothing.
He's a great guy. He's a wonderful husband, a great brother, a terrific uncle. He's going to be a father soon. And, you know, we just want to know something.
Something, anything. But with each passing hour, hope for more miracles is dwindling.
One woman said to me today, even if it's only 2 more hours that I can hold on to this hope, I'm going to hold on to those 2 hours.
Father Walter Smith is a Catholic priest offering grief counseling to the victims' families.
You can't be in this and not be affected by it.
Jacques, bring in the truck of potatoes and hand them their peelers.
Among those still waiting, the family of Paul Beattini, 40 years old, husband of Susan. Tomorrow is their 10th wedding anniversary.
He was a wonderful man, loving and supportive. He was just the kind of guy that I think all my friends wish that they could find.
The couple has 2 daughters, 3-year-old Daria and 5-year-old Julia. The girls Paul calls my little princesses. On Tuesday morning, Paul, who hardly ever goes to the World Trade Center, was attending a business meeting on its 104th floor. It was also orientation day at his little girl's preschool.
His eyes were filled. He was just about to cry because he couldn't go to nursery school on Tuesday morning, and he was just talking about he had to get up early because he had this meeting in the World Trade Center.
From the World Trade Center that morning, Paul called home at 8:04.
He simply asked to speak to Daria Lee, and I put her on the phone, and he said that she should remember that day was just really orientation, and that the first day was really Thursday, and that we would all go together and take pictures, which is today.
As he left his home in Park Ridge, New Jersey that fateful morning, it was the usual routine.
He kissed me on the cheek like he did every morning when he left. He never left his house without kissing me on the cheek and telling me that he loved me.
Less than 3 hours later, Paul disappeared in the rubble of the Twin Towers.
What has this been like for you?
You know, it's almost impossible to describe how you go from telling your husband that his tie might not be the one that he should wear that day and what you're going to do for dinner that night to phone calls and cell phones and people coming to your house and it's just insanity.
It's now been more than 60 hours of deafening silence.
I know that everyone is talking about hope and holding on to hope, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do that. But in my heart, when I close my eyes and I try to be with him, I don't feel. And I think he's gone. I think he was in that building when it collapsed.
For Paul Beattini's parents, Doris and Mike, the shock and the grief is now giving way to anger, targeted at whoever committed this heinous assault.
I don't know what kind of a God they got, but it's not ours.
So we are peaceful people, but something must be done to stop this.
And what have they done to this family?
Oh my God, what have they done? You cannot imagine. All my children are wonderful, everyone. But Paul everyone has something special. And Paul was the big moose.
Is that you, Belle?
The big loud person.
Above all, he was a family man who loved his time with his little girls.
And what's that one?
Dad teaching us how to ride a bike.
Those little girls who have no idea why Daddy has not yet come home.
My thoughts are 2 months from now, 3 months from now, on Christmas Eve, or Christmas morning when our kids wake up and he's not here, and you know, Halloween costumes and trick-or-treating and all those wonderful treats that life has for you. I don't know what I'm going to do without him.
That's the U.S. flag outside the Pentagon tonight, and you can see a fireman coming down the ladder because a short while ago we reported that fires had broken out at the Pentagon.
Now, when I was in Oklahoma City, I recall the dogs then were having difficulties because they kept finding dead bodies and not any living, and they had people hide in the rubble to give the dogs some hope, really, that there were survivors. That you don't think will happen in this case?
I don't feel it will happen with our dogs because of the fact that they're cross-trained in patrol work, and they'll just go for human scent. But the problem there is that there's so many people. Occasionally, we just have to move all the rescue workers out and concentrate on a certain area with all the rescue workers out, and then they can come back in once we find something.
We're hearing that this building in the area is very shaky, and there's still concerns that it could come down. You've been working in there. Have you watched this building sway? Have you seen other buildings that you were concerned about that might come tumbling down?
Obviously, there is some fear because some of the buildings are unstable. I'm not sure which building it is, but one of the buildings they had was drifted 5 degrees over the night, and then had drifted another few degrees, and they pulled everyone off the main rubble just until they could make sure that building would be secure or not crumble down.
The city building, someone with the city building department said that they thought that in fact the buildings were structurally sound, and I've talked to a lot of people out here who would disagree with that, and it sounds like you would too.
I'm not sure that just looking up, working in the rubble piles, and then looking up and seeing the damage that's done to some of these buildings that are nearby, that would be a tough call. But again, I'm not an engineer.
Well, stay safe out there, officer. We appreciate all the hard work you're doing. Shepard, I can tell you that the impact itself of the towers collapsing registered 2.5 on the Richter scale. People in the area are telling me that they are seeing a lot of structural damages to the buildings, cracks, and that sort of thing. So definitely, there's a lot of tension out there and concern over possible building
We had a lot of
collapse.
excitement a minute ago, Rick. We thought that they had found somebody because we knew that they were moving somebody over to the hospital. As it turns out, that police officer, I now understand, was running from a partial collapse at 1 Liberty Plaza, running away from there, and had a heart attack as he was running. Have you heard anything about this collapse, partial collapse at least, of that building?
No, but we had heard earlier that there was a partial collapse earlier of that very same building. A couple of guys who've been in there were describing to me a giant hole in the side of that building that was apparently caused by falling debris from the World Trade Center. It's right across the street from where the Twin Towers once stood. So it's easy to understand how there could be structural damage, and with all of the rumbling that's going on in there, the heavy construction equipment, the crane activity, how there could be further developments. And by the way, it's supposed to rain heavily, and that also could further weaken the building structure, Shepard.
Rain, certainly bad news. Scheduled